The Sopranos aired from 1997 to 2007. During the show's 6 seasons, 86 episodes of the series were produced. The series covered a variety of subjects, including murders, sex, gambling, and even political manipulation. However, it didn't cover everything. There were a handful of episode ideas that never made it to production. Over the years, we've been able to glean pieces of these lost episodes from interviews with the writers. The most complete of these is the interview that Terrence Winter did on the 18th episode of the Talking Sopranos podcast. I'll be using clips of that episode in this video. Now, most of these are just snippets or ideas for an episode, and as such we're missing a lot of the context. I'm gonna do my best to fill in the gaps and hypothesize about what these episodes would have been about, but just know that these are educated guesses.
Why don't you stick to what you know, and leave your opinions wherever the fuck?
Also, I'm not only going to be spoiling The Sopranos, but also some related stuff from Boardwalk Empire and Breaking Bad, so be warned.
There was one episode during the sequence of episodes where Tony was in the hospital where we wanted to do a script about, I think it was called the 6th floor or the 5th floor, about the privilege of rich people in hospitals. That, like, you know, a fancy hospital in New York, there's a floor that you don't know about, the average person doesn't know about, but if you're a celebrity or you're a rich person, that's where you go. And it's not like any of the other floors. It's like, oh, they have rooms where the family can stay, and and basically Tony, pulls some strings to get that special treatment. But by the point in that storyline, we just felt like we've been in that hospital so long, let's not do it. I think we might have actually had a script that was even written.
The first cut episode is one that I'm calling the 5th floor. As Terrence describes it, it would have been about Tony, still in the hospital after being shot, trying to get into an exclusive floor of the hospital. In the US, VIP areas for celebrities and important people are a real thing, and the episode would have revolved around Tony trying to get into that floor of the hospital. Now, we've seen elements of exclusivity in the episode Luxury Lounge, when Christopher tries to get into the VIP area with Sir Ben Kingsley. He reacts very jealously when denied access, and I imagine that Tony would have reacted similarly when he learned about the VIP floor of the hospital. I imagine the episode would have been like A Hit is a Hit, when Tony tries to get into the golfing club but is denied. Given how easily angered he was at that point from his injuries, I imagine that he would have stewed for a while before threatening his way into the floor, just like we saw him do with the paramedic. The episode would have also probably had some moments for Carmela. She obviously would be concerned about Tony's recovery and want the best for him. It would have also been a chance to explore her elitism, as we know that Carmela likes to have the best things in life, and would probably want access to the floor for vanity reasons. Now, this is one of the rare examples of scripts that were actually written and completed before being cut. Now, Winter says that the episode was cut because they didn't need another hospital episode after spending 2 episodes there already. And while that's probably true, there might have been another reason for the cut. The episode was written by Robin Green and Mitch Burgess. As I've talked about already in my writer's room video, they were having problems with David Chase at this point, and shortly after this, David would fire them from the show. It's been speculated that David cut their episodes in particular because of the animosity between them, though if that was a factor at all, it was probably towards the bottom of the list.
There was another script I think Matt Weiner reminded us of recently that he wrote that was sort of about the home life of the female FBI agent who was flipping Adriana. Like, we got to spend time with her at home, and I'm not really sure, maybe Tony had an affair with her or something like that, and that never really got any traction.
The next episode is one that I'm going to call Danielle, simply because it would have revolved around the home life of the FBI agent Deborah Cicerone. At the end of the 3rd season, she went undercover as a woman named Danielle and befriended Adriana in an attempt to gain information on Tony and Christopher. When her relationship with Adriana came to an end over jealousy, the FBI brought Adriana in and coerced her into becoming an informant. The cut episode would have been about Deborah's home life. We do know that she has a young baby at home and a husband, so presumably we would have gotten to see more of her interactions with them. Her husband on the show was played by Will Arnett, and one of the sad parts of not getting this episode meant that we never got to see Will steal the spotlight as a little too believable FBI agent.
Police, open up!
Terrence also mentioned that she might have had an affair with Tony. We do know that he was interested in her, even bringing her up in season 5, long after her friendship with Adriana had ended. Whether this relationship was consensual or something she was forced to do to maintain her cover, we'll never know. And also, I'm not sure if this plot point even existed or if Terrence is misremembering. He says that Matt Weiner wrote the episode, but Matt joined the show in the 5th season, and by that point, Deborah was no longer undercover. Again, we'll never know the details of this unproduced episode, but it is interesting to imagine.
I remember that never got going. I remember I had pitched one, an episode where Tony finds a young kid breaks into his house, and when Tony's the only one there, and Tony gets this kid, and catches the kid, and then they're stuck. He's stuck. He doesn't know what to do, and he ends up killing the kid. The kid's just this burglar, but the kid now has already I forget how it ended up turning out. But Tony, it's this episode that the whole thing takes place entirely in the house. It's just Tony and this kid, and he ends up killing him rather than let him go. Obviously we never did that too. But.
The next one is one that I'm calling Bluebell Boy, for reasons that I'll explain in a little bit. In the proposed story, Tony would catch a young kid who broke into his house while he was there alone. After catching the kid, Tony would be left with a decision about what to do with him. In the end, he would decide to kill him. Structurally, the episode reminds me of the 3rd episode of Breaking Bad, where Walt has to decide what to do with Crazy 8. Just like that episode, I imagine that Tony would have bonded a little with the captured kid, maybe even seeing a little bit of himself in him. However, in the end, Tony would choose the dark path, killing the kid in order to keep him quiet. I call this episode Bluebell Boy because Terrence Winter would later reuse this idea in his own show Boardwalk Empire. In the season 3 episode called Bluebell Boy, the main character Nucky Thompson finds a thief who's stolen from him, but ends up trapped with the kid in a house. They end up talking and bonding for a bit, and you think that he's going to take him under his wing, only for Nucky to shoot the kid at the last moment. This episode was obviously inspired by this cut episode from The Sopranos, and it's cool to see that it gained new life on another show.
Something's telling me you might have been involved in a storyline about a mentally ill guy outside the pork store.
Yeah, who was obsessed with the Rolling Stones.
Oh, obsessed with the Rolling Stones and the fluorescent pig in the window. Oh, yeah, we can never back up.
The next 2 episodes are only little snippets of ideas, and we have no context for the episodes as a whole, so I'm just going to cover them briefly. One idea was about a crazy homeless guy outside of Satriale's who was obsessed with the Rolling Stones. Now, David Chase was obsessed with the Stones and rock and roll in general. He included a lot of references to the band in the show, such as Janice's boob tattoo and Ralphie saying lines from Sympathy for the Devil. The Stones are also featured prominently in his feature film, Not Fade Away. I have no idea why the Satriale sign was so significant to this guy, but if it's another Rolling Stones reference, feel free to let me know in the comments.
But there was also one other one that we never did. I remember seeing it on the whiteboard, a rat and nobody cares. So there was like a rat who got out of prison nobody gave a shit anymore. But one of the guys was like, we got to get this guy, but nobody cared at this point.
Another episode idea was about a rat who got out of prison, but no one cared enough to do anything about it. This episode was obviously meant to touch on the decline of mafia standards that we see throughout the show. I can understand though why this idea was cut, as it's not really strong enough to base an entire episode on, when the show already had so many other examples of this theme to cover.
I got enough complications in my life. Feds up my ass. For business reasons, okay, but for political correctness?
However, I saved the best for last. The final cut episode we're going to cover is what happened to the Russian in Pine Barrens.
Then afterwards, I kept pitching because people were freaking out. What happened? I had pitched David on the idea of 2 years later, Christopher goes to see Slava and he walks in and the guy is sweeping the floor again. And Christopher, they meet eyes. And Christopher's like, holy shit, he knows me. And then Valerie, the Russian guy, turns around and half the back of his head is gone. He's clearly brain damaged. He doesn't remember anything. And Christopher is like, oh my God. And it's the guy's completely a vegetable who's just, he just sweeps the floor. But he keeps looking at Christopher like, I know, I just can't communicate.
That's right. We were originally going to get an answer as to what happened to the Russian Valerie. Pine Barrens is without a doubt the most popular episode of the series, and the mystery of what happened to the Russian is one of the most commonly debated topics about the series. Fans hoped that we would get a resolution and hopefully see the Russian again, and it turns out that Terrence Winter originally wanted to bring the character back. However, David refused, as he believed the idea was just pandering to the audience.
And David was on board with it, or so I thought, and I think I made a fatal error. I said, oh man, the audience is going to love this. And he went, well, that's the worst reason in the world to do it. Because, fuck,
That's not a good.
No.
That was the
And I was like, so I think the consolation was there was a line of dialogue at the bada bing where like, Boy Scouts probably found him or something, or he got eaten by squirrels or whatever. Who gives a shit anyway? Just to move on from that.
Now, David's attitude to the situation has led some people to think that he just hates the audience and wants to deny them what they want to see. And to a certain extent, I think that's true. However, he explained in another interview that it's just his style, as he likes films that don't give you every single answer.
The audience just doesn't get to see every piece of the world.
Yeah, you don't get to see every piece of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, and this happens because I like watching entertainment like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to have every question answered.
Mm-hmm.
I like there to be possibilities for me to think. That's why it's not like some kind of snotty attitude like, oh, well, I have contempt for the audience. That's the kind of movies I like to go to see.
And ultimately, that is what makes The Sopranos such a powerful show. You don't always get the resolutions you want. Nobody wants great characters to be killed off, but ultimately that's what makes for great drama and storytelling. And David's restraint on just pandering to the audience is what elevates The Sopranos beyond the usual television schlock.
I'm not running a fucking popularity contest.
And that's it for the cut episodes. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know what episodes you would have liked to see the most. And stay tuned for more great content coming soon. I could never cut you patrons out of my life. Matt Joyce, Uncle Mike, Sam Cedarland, Celery Man, Cheshire, Brandon Taylor, and James Johnson.